there, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Movie Screeners Club podcast. I'm your host, Diana Cambronero. The Movie Screeners Club podcast is brought to you by Designing Hollywood Productions in association with Gardena Cinema. Do you want to win the chance to have your film showcased on the big screen and an opportunity to be interviewed on this very podcast? Go ahead and submit your film today at themoviescreenersclub.com. So we're here with Max Stafford and Leo Pfeifer, the director and producer of This Is Not Life, an amazing documentary about the incarceration of a man who was doing time for a marijuana offense and the injustice behind it. So first question, walk us through what the pre-production process looks like for this for non-documentary filmmakers. And a lot of us are narrative, so it might look different for you guys, right?
Yeah, definitely. Pre-production took the longest time. Actually shooting it was like 5 days. And then post took a long time too, but just as far as like finding the story, doing the research, like getting the right people on board, making sure like I have the right information, like kind of like molding where we're going with the story took by far the longest for me. I started this project almost 5 years ago, right? 2025 or no, almost 4 years ago. But yeah, for me, like, and I'm sure Leo can add to this too. It was really just like I had a story that I wanted to tell, but I didn't know like who would kind of be like the right vessel for that message. And so I kind of started to do that research on like what type of incarcerated individual, and then going down that rabbit hole, finding that there's people that are serving life for pot. There's like a whole website called Life for Pot. And then like, that's a whole list of like 20 to 30 people, or I think even less now. But got like some advocacy groups like on board to kind of just give me some more information. And then when I heard about Pedro's story, I knew it was the right one. And so from there is kind of just doing these recorded phone call interviews with him for 15 minutes at a time. Um, Gathered probably like 4 hours, I want to say, of recorded phone call interviews and kind of pieced that together into like a little teaser. And then at that point, Leo came on board and kind of took the story and kind of molded it even more. And I'll hand it off to Leo.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Diana, for having us on, and thanks for screening our film. And it's an honor to receive the Audience Award. It was a really cool screening. I think the key thing for me in documentaries is people think you find your story, you set up the logistics, and you go shoot, and then you figure it all out later. And for me, the key piece of it is always balancing planning and infusing like a deep intentionality into the process and into your filmmaking approach, while also being open to the spontaneity of what it is you're capturing in the story that you find and what you end up shooting. So the first step for me whenever I come on board a doc project is to build a relationship with the subjects. So talk to them, get to know them, build that friendship and that connection. And from there, it's really understanding like what the kernel is of that story. And the big thing is like, what's that turning point? And how do you flesh out the narrative? And then you're basically building your best guess as to like, what is the arc? What is the narrative of this piece? What are the scenes we're going to film? What are we going to capture? What's the best aesthetic approach and general visual language to bring to that, to bring that whole thing to life? And that's a really exciting part. So basically, we kind of write out a script of what our best guess is that the film will be like. And I find that a little bit of it is sort of freakishly exactly what we thought. A lot of it is kind of similar, and a lot of it is just completely different in practice. But big picture, I would say for me, pre-production is all about meeting the subjects, building that relationship, getting them comfortable with me, sharing things about myself, and building that relationship, and then just really understanding their story, planning out the narrative of what we're going to capture. And then, that's your best shot going into filming.
Right. So what stood out to you specifically about Pedro's story then, in comparison to the rest of the people who were incarcerated for similar things?
Um, I think at the heart of it was his daughter, Alejandra. And I I read about a lot of them, but a lot of them also kind of just don't really have that deep dive on into their story. And um Alejandra was like a centerpiece of kind of like how it has affected families in general. And that's like what attracted me to just incarceration as a subject in general. But also with Pedro's case, there's a lot of like layers to it that like as I started to kind of like pitch it to people and tell more people about it, they would be like, "Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?" Like to every layer. And that was just the fact that he was part of like a 78 person conspiracy case. Four of his brothers were involved. They all got clemency from Obama in 2017. His wife was indicted and did, I think, around 10 years or so, and passed away shortly after she got out. So Pedro was like kind of like a last man standing of this, huge conspiracy case that was like part of this 90s era where there's very harsh sentences for drug um, offenders and kind of kingpins is how they kind of made them out to be. And so Pedro's story was just like emblematic of like a lot of different aspects of like what drew me to the story in general. And I went into my first meeting with Amy Pova, who's an advocate for nonviolent drug offenders. She's an executive producer on the film. She's also a clemency recipient herself from Clinton. And I went in my first meeting with her having Pedro in mind, and I wanted to, bring him up. And before I could even like say his name, she's like, "There's one person that's perfect for this that I really think you should explore." And she's like, "It's Pedro Moreno." So that all kind of was very serendipitous and kind of just like made sense to start talking to him and his family. And then from my first phone call with Pedro, my first phone call with Alejandra, um, without even kind of getting into like the details of like the beats of their story and how it has like affected them emotionally, you could just like tell that something was like super raw and there and ready to kind of just be told to the world. Um, so yeah,
So you said that you recorded like hours upon hours of, was it hours or 4 hours of phone call with Pedro?
yeah, I think around 4 hours or so of these phone calls, which they only let you do 15 minutes at a time. We also got denied visitation because we didn't know him prior to his incarceration,
Interesting.
and we're not family. So we had to do these phone call interviews, which was a challenge, but it also created like a lot of opportunities for us. And I kind of got a lot of these like main points of his story just so like we kind of heard it from him. And then Leo came in and did, I don't even know how many you did, but probably like doubled mine or more. Leo kind of like was able to get into the nitty gritty of like how all this makes him feel that I didn't really dive into.
Yeah, I mean, I think what really pulled me into this film when Max came to me about it is it's about these big topics, mass incarceration, the war on drugs, the 80s and 90s hysteria that caused all of this, these extraordinary long prison sentences. But at the heart of it, it's a story about a father and a daughter, and it's about their love for each other and how their hope and their relationship survived all of these years. And that's what we really built the film around. Otherwise, it would just be a really depressing. You'd watch it and you'd feel bad. Really, the core of it was let's follow Alejandra as our hero of this story, and Pedro is the supporting character in that journey. And we follow their relationship since she was 8 years old. Then when we filmed, her oldest child was 8 years old. Yeah, we probably had at least 10 hours of interview with
Yeah.
Pedro. That was over the course of years. And like Max said, the federal prison system only allows 15-minute phone calls, and that's for anyone. That's for family, friends, filmmakers like us. So you talk and then it just cuts you off. And it was really about getting Pedro to open up in those 15 minutes and building that connection. And you think about someone who's been in prison, which is a very hardened environment where you have to keep your emotions down. And he's of an older generation too, where you're not really used to sharing your feelings in that same way. So that was a big task to kind of reach that place where he felt comfortable sharing those things and opening up, and just a lot of talking about stuff that had nothing to do with the film and about the world and politics and international relations and family and whatever. I just get a phone call. I'd show up Colorado Federal Prison, many days for like a year plus. So yeah, honing that in was just all about what supports that narrative, right? What's act one, act two, act three of that story. I approach documentary the exact same way I approach narrative work or fiction work, where you're tracking that arc and you're finding the emotional setups and the payoffs and the way to bring the audience in to connect with that journey. So if you watch the film, really every second of that film was in service of Pedro and Alejandra's relationship with each other. So that is what completely informed what made it in of the, 10, 12 hours of phone calls with Pedro.
Yeah, because I was curious how you're able to get for lack of a better word, performance out of that because I mean
Mhm.
she really comes off as really empathetic and so does Pedro. Even though we don't see his face, we still feel for him and his story. So getting that, response from them to showcase on camera is really important. And I guess difficult, right? Because you have to have a certain touch with people, right? And like be able to read them or, say the right thing, right, in order to get that sort of reaction. What was the opening point that you found with Pedro and his daughter to like get them to open up in that way?
It's hard to say exactly because it's kind of an impossible task. It's like a normal person living their life, and you suddenly invade it one day with like a six-person crew and a big camera and microphones and lights. And it's sort of ridiculous to ask anybody to behave normally or act natural or live their own lives. So for me, it's all about that relationship with them and building that trust. They need to trust me. I need to trust them. And I'm very upfront from the very beginning. I say, hey, like, we're going to kind of invade your life for the better part of a week. I'm going to ask you really uncomfortable questions. And for the audience to feel what you've been through, you're going to have to go there. And it's going to have some painful moments, and it's going to cause you to have to really dig deep and access some places that are tough to access and that might hurt to access. Is this a journey you're open to embarking on with us? And it's such a beautiful, generous thing when people are open to doing that. And then there's really no magic trick or like secret toolkit. I mean, there's a lot of little things you pick up, but really it's about getting there, and you have your crew and the huge camera and lenses, and you just work through it. It's like, okay, let's collaboratively make this thing together, where we access your emotional truth. I don't really believe in fly on the wall filmmaking where you just sit there and kind of film what happens, because people behave in a certain way when there's a camera out. You're performing in a certain way when there's a camera out. If I took my iPhone out and started filming you right now, you'd be performing a little bit for that camera. So it's really recognizing that we're sort of engaging in a level of artifice whenever we do a documentary, and how do we use that to reach somebody's emotional truth while still being factually true, like journalistically, and factually true in terms of the story of what happened. But when we're actually going to shoot it, it's all about capturing that authentic emotional truth and not just following somebody around with a camera.
How do the kids react to this film crew being in their homes?
They loved it.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, we were so lucky. Noelle was like 6 months old. So you have a baby who your biggest issue is like object permanence. You just try and be far enough away that he doesn't stare at the camera. Uh, Ceci was a little shy, but kind of opened up to us. But she was never, who's their younger daughter, she was never too into it, but she kind of put up with us. And then Norby, the oldest kid, loved it. The challenge was getting him to not look into the camera which we he got used to us after a day or two, and he wasn't, but he was like excited to be a movie star. He asked us to tell him to put the next Sonic movie out sooner. He was like the sweetest kid. So all in all, it was just so beautiful to be so accepted by this family.
They still in touch with you? Do you still keep in contact? What do they think of the outcome of the documentary?
Yeah, we're still very in touch with them. Definitely with Alejandra. I text her probably once a week, if not like a few times a week, just talking about kind of the reception of the film and different comments, both good and bad. And she's, very thankful that she's been able to like get her story out there. And she's just shared a lot of like very personal, emotional things with us about just like how she feels about her story being out there for really the first time. She hasn't really talked about it publicly ever. And Pedro, just because of his phone call situation, it's a little bit harder to kind of like keep in touch because we can't just text him and say, hey, like the film's out, or, we can't give him a call. He has to call us. So it's a little bit difficult to keep in touch with him. And he's talking to his daughter every day, so we can kind of communicate through that way. But they're an amazing family. They're so strong and resilient. And I think what's interesting about our film is that we released it about a month before Biden was leaving office. And so much, there has been so many events that have happened in the pardon and clemency world since we released the film that are just very hard, not only for us to watch, but also for Alex, for Alejandra, just seeing people let out of prison like at the rate that they are. We all just kind of sit here wishing that like, something could happen for Pedro. And that's something that like we are in constant communication with Alejandra about, and as well as Pedro's advocates, just kind of keeping our finger on the pulse. And like Pedro says in the film, patience and faith, that's kind of the only thing you can have as you just wait for something to happen. But they're such an amazing family, and we're very thankful to have found them and, be able to tell their story and work with them to tell their story as well.
So where can our viewers find you on socials, websites, and you want to plug in right now?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at underscore Leo Pfeifer, or my website, leopfeifer.com.
Yeah, and then you can find me at maximilian.stafford on IG. And my production company is groundfloor.tv on Instagram, groundfloor.mov online, our website. And my website is maxstafford.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us here. Any parting words you want to give our viewers?
Thank you for having us. It's always a really lucky thing to have a place to screen your film and build community and have those in-person experiences around filmmaking, especially where it's people who are really engaged in these specific projects just for the passion of it. So I appreciate you guys for having us on the podcast and connecting us with filmmakers at the screening and hosting such a beautiful screening.
Awesome.
Yeah. And like Leo said in the beginning of this, thank you to everyone who came to the screening last week, 2 weeks ago, and for giving us the honor of the audience award. We were very honored, and also to do this with you, Diana, is a huge honor. And thank you guys for, letting us talk about this and hopefully spread the word a little bit. And then the last thing I'll say is to free Pedro Moreno.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Movie Screeners Club podcast. Please like and subscribe.